Could it be? With me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to a Louie T Network exclusive day 1 and 2 of the Senior Bowl recap. And I'm going to give you the guys that stood out to me on those first 2 days. Had a chance to take a look at practice. And there were some impressive performances. And, you know, we make a lot out of the combine. You know, we make a lot out of these pro days. But this is the only extracurricular off-season activity that prepares us for the draft that actually simulates football. You know, they're wearing pads. There's actual physical contact. You don't get that anywhere else unless you're playing in one of those all-star games like the East-West Shrine game or the actual game itself on Saturday. But you don't get that at the combine. You don't get that at a pro day. And we go and fawn over the pro days and the combine. But this is the Senior Bowl to me is where it all begins. And in one of the sayings at the Senior Bowl is the draft starts in Mobile. And I feel like draft season itself starts in Mobile because that's when it's really real to me. That's when the draft juices get flowing, when I see these guys hit the field in Mobile and start to try to jockey for positioning in the upcoming spring's draft. So if you haven't already done so, do me a huge favor, subscribe to the Louie T Network for more great content. Turn on your notification bell so you don't miss a thing, and also hit the like button as it helps this channel grow exponentially. I've already started my Draft Prospects 101 breakdowns with the quarterbacks, and we've already jumped into 2 of them. We're going to talk about those 2 quarterbacks that I've already broken down and several more during this breakdown of the first 2 days of practice at the Senior Bowl. But if you're interested for more draft content, and there'll be plenty of it coming out of this channel, as it always is, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. So with that said, let's jump into Senior Bowl practice day number 1. And the weather was beautiful, which was not the case for day number 2. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. But the guys were able to hit the field for the first time. And, you know, what you see that first day a lot of times, there's a lot of mistakes. You see a guys learning, transitioning. Again, you're not playing with your teammates. There isn't a rapport there. So I don't really get too hung up on, you know, ball placement or, you know, because you think a guy's going to be here. He thinks you're going to be, you know, you're going to throw it there. And there are disconnects. You see it all the time. So I just want to see how the ball, you know, travels and how comfortable guys look in the environment. And the thing that I really enjoy, I know a lot of people love the DB wide receiver one-on-one matchups. That's cool. But a lot of times those matchups favor the wide receiver. I love the trenches matchups between the offensive line and the D-line. I think you learn a lot there, mano y mano. And I felt like the first day of practice was more so geared towards those guys going at it. Really the first 2 days, but really the first day in particular. I really wanted to focus in on the quarterbacks a little bit more in day 2 when the weather was inclement and it wasn't as nice of a day. But the first day, these are the guys that stood out to me, and they're going to help themselves in the upcoming draft in terms of, we talk about the Senior Bowl, we talk about the combine, we talk about, you know, pro days. All of these are a part of your body of work. The tape is the thing that is really the biggest part of your grade, if you will, you know, your draftable grade, if you will. And then the Senior Bowl, I think, is the next biggest piece if you're there at the Senior Bowl, because again, they get to see you hands-on in an environment that simulates football. So this is a big part of your draft grade as well, I feel like. And so I thought some guys really helped themselves in day 1 and really have throughout the week. There are a couple of guys that I think this carried over into day number 2 for them as well. Edge rusher Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. This is a guy that's 6'5", right around 260. And this guy looks like a legit problem off the edge. He was at times unblockable in day 1. There weren't many times he was blocked on day number 1. He showed so many different tools, and this is a guy that really day 1 and day 2 I thought showed just about every tool in his bag, and he's going to be a tough guy to stop at the next level if he's able to set tackles up, able to learn the nuances of the game, study film, see how tackles set, and then learn how to play off of that. If he's able to dictate what is going to happen instead of letting tackles dictate to him how that rep goes, he's going to be dangerous because he's explosive off the snap. He has the ability to use his hands, and he's got a nasty crossover and a spin move to match. So there's a lot in the tool belt of a Jermaine Johnson. And this is a guy that I look at and I say, he has got star pass rusher written all over him. If he can put it all together, he was unblockable in day number 1. And really, he was a guy that they couldn't block in day 2 either. The next guy, and to me, these are the top 2 guys that I watched these first 2 days of practice. Right now, to me, they're the biggest risers of the defensive side of the football. If you're talking D-line, front 7, Jermaine Johnson for me and Devontae Wyatt of Georgia. And look, a lot is made of that Georgia front, and for good reason. That's the reason the Georgia Bulldogs won the national championship, is because that defense was dominant and it was led by their defensive front. A lot of people love to talk about Jordan Davis, and rightfully so. He's a mammoth of a man, and he's a tremendous athlete for his size. A lot of people like to talk about Trayvon Walker. He's going to go early in this draft as well. And again, rightfully so. He is a beast of an edge rusher. But I think the guy that was the unsung hero, a guy that went under the radar with that group, was Devontae Wyatt. And, sometimes when you're playing in a scheme, and, my wife asked me, what's the purpose of the Senior Bowl? Like, does everybody get invited? Because, she didn't know. And I said, so I explained to her why the Senior Bowl is important. And to me, the Senior Bowl is important for guys like Devontae Wyatt. You know what I'm saying? And the reason that is because when you're a collegiate athlete and you're playing in a team sport, sometimes you have to sacrifice for the good of the team. Sometimes your scheme doesn't accentuate your skill set. So you're not able to see exactly what a guy can do individually because he's playing within the scheme, within the framework of the scheme for the betterment of the team. Where the Senior Bowl, to me, highlights your individual attributes. You're able to show the things that maybe you weren't able to show on tape because you were a 2-gapper. But you can be a one gap penetrator, and you can get up the field, and you can win individual one-on-one matchups. So sort of like basketball, college basketball. If you're playing in a scheme, like, I'll give you a great example of a guy that we didn't know how good he was because he played within a scheme in college basketball. Then he gets to the NBA and we're like, whoa, we didn't see this in college. You had to be able to project. You had to be able to see that he had this skill set. Anthony Davis at Kentucky, he played the traditional big man role for the Wildcats while at Kentucky for that 1 year. And you didn't know he could dribble the basketball, that he was, a point guard at one point, and that he had the skills that he had until you actually saw him handle the rock and be able to do the things, because he didn't get an opportunity to do those things. I liken that to what you see at the Senior Bowl with some guys, and I think Devontae Wyatt is a great example of a guy that you didn't necessarily get to see all of the attributes that this guy brings to the table. He is so explosive. He is so twitchy. He is so skilled inside that he's going to be a problem, and I think someone's going to get themselves a hell of a football player. He's unblockable at the Senior Bowl right now. They cannot block this guy. I think I've only seen him lose 1 rep out of about a good 8 of them. He's been just a freak on the defensive line, and I'll tell you this, when you watch him, he reminds me a lot of Levi Onwuzurike from last year's draft that went in the 2nd round to the Lions out of UW. And I think he's a more polished Levi Onwuzurike, who was very explosive and twitchy, but I don't think he was as skilled as a Devontae Wyatt, who I think has the quickness, the twitchiness, but also the skill to match. He's been a force of nature at the Senior Bowl this week to this point, and I think he's helping himself immensely as well. He's one of those guys right now. He's a 2nd round pick. Is Devontae Wyatt, I think. With performances like this, and if this continues throughout the rest of the draft buildup, So if this continues at the combine, and I'm hearing that this guy's going to run somewhere in the 4.8s in his 40 time. Like if this continues through the combine and through the pro day, I can see this guy sneaking into the first round because he looks that good. The next guy for me is John Ridgway out of Arkansas. This guy at 6'6", right around 320. I mean, this guy's humongous. He reminds me a lot of Henry Anderson. Now, Henry Anderson's more of a 300-pounder, but he's a guy that I think so this is the thing. He was a defensive tackle / end at Arkansas. But you watch him at the Senior Bowl, they're playing him inside, which that might be his position. They may kick him outside. He may ultimately be a 3-tech, a 5-tech at the next level, and I think that may ultimately be his best position, similar to a Henry Anderson. That said, who it was at Stanford when he came out, a natural base 4-3 defensive end. They ultimately kicked him outside to a 5-tech at the NFL level, whether he was with the Colts or he's with the Jets. Now I think he's with the Patriots. Henry Anderson, they kind of a similar frame. This guy is country strong, is John Ridgway, and I liked what I saw out of him. Saw a little bit of skill, but I was more impressed with the leverage. For a guy his size at 6'6", for the leverage that he played with, getting up under the pads of these offensive linemen and pushing them back, I thought he was really impressive. He collapsed the pocket consistently throughout day number 1. And then finally, a guy that stood out to me on the offensive line was offensive tackle Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa. So, all the names that we hear, the Alabama tackle, you hear about the tackle from NC State, and these are the guys that are going to dominate the conversation. But here's a guy in Trevor Penning that played at a smaller school, obviously in Northern Iowa, but we've seen talent come from that program before into the NFL, David Johnson most notably, and recently. But this is a guy that has the ability to get the job done, and he wasn't just good, he was dominant day 1. I mean, he was throwing guys out of the club, and out of the bar, left and right. I mean, he's tossing guys down. One time he tossed a guy down so violently that he actually threw him into the legs of quarterback Desmond Ridder, and so they had to tell him, bro, chill, okay, chill out. So this guy's tossing guys around like a rag doll. He's physical, but he's got that lean frame that you're looking for at the tackle position, got long arms, good feet, looks the part, does Trevor Penning, of a guy that isn't overwhelmed by playing against the level of competition that he is now being faced with. Looks very comfortable in his surroundings, and I think this is a guy that's going to transition well to the next level, and I think he's helping himself at the Senior Bowl, and definitely did in day number 1. So let's get to day 2, and I thought day 2 was really intriguing because the weather played a factor, and a lot was made of Kenny Pickett's hands. Remember, I talked about this on the podcast on, I want to say it was Wednesday. I started off the show, I talked about this. This was something I meant to mention during his draft prospects 101 breakdown, but failed to. But I said, I think he has smaller hands. Now, I'm not a big measure the hand guy because I don't care. Joe Burrow had small hands. Matthew Stafford had small hands, but it can be a problem. And a lot of people think of it from a grip standpoint and getting hit and fumbling the football. I think about it from a grip standpoint when the weather is inclement. I don't really care about, because if you put 2 hands on the ball, if you put it away, if you protect it, you can withstand a hit and still maintain possession of the football. I worry about it when it's raining outside, it's snowing outside, it's 8 degrees outside, like the Bills just played in a playoff game in Wild Card Weekend when it was 5 degrees outside. That's when I want to know if you have the ability to grip the football and still rip it. And it was raining, and you got to see if guys could throw the football adequately in the conditions that they were in. And Kenny Pickett came out with 1 glove. He's famously known as 2 gloves Kenny, or Kenny 2 gloves. He came out with 1 glove, and it wasn't the sticky tack glove gloves that we're used to seeing him wear, but rather just 1 black glove, and it was the one that didn't have the sticky tack on it. So, because the sticky tack, when it gets wet a lot of times, when it gets soaked, it becomes slick. So he came with the basic glove that helps him grip the football. Remember, he did not measure his hand at the Senior Bowl. He talked about having double jointed thumbs and that his thumb points towards his fingers. And so if you measure from the thumb all the way up, it's going to be not, his hands won't measure as big as they should, whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, I thought he struggled throwing the football in the conditions, but he was not alone. I thought Desmond Ridder struggled throwing the football in the wet conditions. I thought Bailey Zappi struggled throwing the football in the wet conditions. However, a guy that excelled throwing the football, and I talked about this in his draft breakdown, was Malik Willis. I talked about his arm talent, and I said I think it's second to none in this year's draft class. And, you know, Sam Howell can spin it too, and he was another guy that didn't have issues cutting through the inclement weather and gripping the football and getting those RPMs on that football. That said, Carson Strong also was okay. I didn't think he was as good as Willis or Howell throwing the football in day number 2, but he wasn't as bad as the other three, Ridder, Pickett, and Zappi, who all struggled throwing the football in those wet conditions. That said, I thought the standout of the quarterback group so far has been Malik Willis. We've seen the athleticism on full display when you watch him at practice, take off and run. That's something he can do immediately. You know, the thing that people keep talking about, and I even mentioned it in his breakdown, is that, you know, of course, he played at Liberty, he transferred from Auburn, so the level of competition wasn't as great. But look, the guy's talented. That's why he was at Auburn initially. He goes to Liberty, plays under Hugh Freeze, has 2 outstanding seasons. But, you know, when the level of competition was raised, the results were mixed. Okay, there were some games where he dominated, like Virginia Tech. I thought he was outstanding. The first time they played against Syracuse in 2020, I thought he was magnificent. But then there's some games in there where he wasn't as good, most notably the Ole Miss game. But again, it's a team sport, and that offensive line in front of him was not up to par. Those skill guys around him, there are only 1 or 2 guys that I trusted him getting the football to that would make plays for him on a consistent basis. That's when you start to see the discrepancy in talent, when you get those teams that are well put together with a bunch of 4- and 5-star athletes on one team going against a team of 2- and 3-star guys. That's when you see the difference. And I think he at some points have been penalized for that. But when you watch him out there, he doesn't look like he is overmatched. Again, similar to what I said with Trevor Penning. He looks to be very comfortable amongst his peers. And I thought his athleticism showed. I thought his ability to spin it showed. I thought he looked confident. I thought he threw it well. He looked good. And I think he's the type of guy that could really help himself over this week, because in this format, the Senior Bowl, which is a week-long process leading up to the game on Saturday, these coaches, these scouts, these evaluators, these GMs, they get a chance to sit down and talk to these kids. They get an opportunity to see them up close and personal. They get to see them interact with their peers. They get to see the ball come out of their hands, and they get to watch these guys learn, take in information, and see if they can't then go back out on the field and execute. So there's a lot to be gained from the Senior Bowl week, and especially at the quarterback position, when you haven't had the ability to watch these guys up close and personal. And a guy like Malik Willis, he's one of those guys that I think in a quarterback draft class that we've talked about ad nauseum that isn't as great. It's not one of those high-level classes that you get excited about, like last year's class or the class before that in 2020. This is a class that's more reminiscent of 2019. You know, and there's not even a Kyler Murray in this class, where it's a definite number 1, and then there's Daniel Jones and Dwayne Haskins and Drew Lock. This is a draft class that's probably more so reminiscent of the draft class back in I want to say it was, I always liken it to the 2011 class, and really that still had Cam Newton, so I don't even think that's fair. This might be that 2014 draft class. I think that was the one with Johnny Manziel. So you're hoping one of these guys separates themselves from the pack. The assumption is that Kenny Pickett's going to be the number 1 quarterback selected. That doesn't have to be the case. You know, and this is the thing that is so intriguing about this year's quarterback crop, is that depending on who you talk to, anybody could have a different perspective on who's the number one quarterback this year. You look at Daniel Jeremiah, I think he's among the consensus of it's Kenny Pickett. I as well think it's Kenny Pickett, initially. Now, I've still got more work to do. I'm going to watch more film, and I tend to watch more film on quarterbacks than any other position because it's such a big body of work, and you have to take in everything and take all of that stuff into consideration. That said, you look at a guy like ESPN's Todd McShay, and he's got Malik Willis as his number one quarterback. So these things can fluctuate, and the distance between these quarterbacks isn't all that great. Okay, a great Senior Bowl week. Let's say that you had a grade of 86 for Kenny Pickett, and coming into the Senior Bowl, your grade for Malik Willis was an 82. That distance could be closed significantly, and he could even then surpass Kenny Pickett, depending on the things that you see and how you feel about him, the information he's able to retain and then regurgitate and then go out and execute. So it's a big week, and so far I think Malik Willis is taking full advantage of that. I thought the rain really helped him. It separated him from the rest of these quarterbacks. It truly did in my eyes. His ability to throw it through that rain and make it look effortless. And I loved his ability to drop down, throw sidearm, and throw from different angles. Malik Willis really has helped himself, especially in day number 2 in particular. Some other guys that stood out in day number 2, a guy that I don't think is on a lot of people's radar is Haskell Garrett out of Ohio State. He's an interior defensive tackle. A guy that's way down on a lot of people's draft boards, but I thought he looked very good in the individual drills, and I thought he showed some explosiveness. I thought he showed some quickness off the snap, some good hand usage, and we all know Larry Johnson is the master at Ohio State at teaching guys how to use their hands, and it looks like Haskell Garrett has the ability to use his hands and then add in some quickness. So I think he's a guy that if he continues to work, may be able to open some eyes a bit, because again, the tape on him, not all that great, which is why he's a lot lower down on the board, but you never know. There could be a hidden gem or two found in the draft. It always is, and he could be one of those guys. I thought he looked really good in day number 2. You switch to the other side of the line, and Daniel Falale was outstanding. Was outstanding. He is so big. He is a mountain of a man. This guy's 6'8", 360 plus, and he actually moves like a big ninja. I mean, I'm watching him engulf some of these dudes, but he's also getting out of the blocks, and not opening up the gate too early. Okay, he's not opening the door to the inside. He's not opening his hips and turning, parallel to the line of scrimmage. He's got good balance. He's got good movement. He's transitioning his weight well, so he's not getting too high up on his toes. He's not too far back on his heels. The even distribution. His feet move well. Stay in front of guys. Doesn't have to lunge or use his arms. I think this guy has a chance to be really good. It reminds me a lot of Trent Brown. I was not the biggest Trent Brown fan coming out of Florida. And when he was drafted by the Raiders, was it the Raiders? It was the 49ers, excuse me. I wasn't the biggest fan of his work. And then he went to New England and something clicked, And I don't know if Dante Scarnecchia was still there or not, but something clicked. And all of a sudden, that big mountain of a man figured it out. And we mocked Orlando Brown for his combine. He's turned into a fantastic NFL tackle. So these big mammoth men that can figure out Mekhi Becton in last year's draft, or 2 years ago, I should say, the draft as a first-round pick. These massive men, if you can get one that is an athletically gifted guy like a Daniel Falale, you got something potentially. And I like what I saw. He moved really well, stayed in front of everyone, and I think he's a guy that is very intriguing in this year's draft. And then another guy that was super intriguing in day number 2 that I thought really helped himself, Logan Hall out of Houston. So here's a guy that is a base defensive end. Okay, right around, he's a big dude, like 6'5", 6'6", right around 200 and let's call it 60, 65 pounds, 270. And what they did at the Senior Bowl was they reduced him inside. And when they reduced him inside, he was unblockable. Okay, now I don't know if you can get away with that at the NFL level. You especially can't do it on first and second down, but on third down, on obvious passing downs, he could be a problem reduced inside as a rusher, as a 3-tech. So I'm looking at what he was able to do against these interior offensive linemen. They had no answers. He was too quick. He was too skilled inside. That is something to keep an eye on because right now he's viewed as an edge rusher. And I think there's something there with him as well. But, he may ultimately be a guy that you can kick inside, have a little bit of flexibility and versatility there along the defensive line. And he may be one of these guys you reduce inside on obvious passing situations, similar to a Michael Bennett, who wasn't the biggest guy in the world, but you reduce him inside and all of a sudden he was unblockable. I could see a guy like Logan Hall being one of those types of players, if he continues to develop and grow in his game. So he was another guy that stood out along the defensive line these first 2 days of practice. And I'll give you an entire position that I am really smitten with this year that showed some things and some flashes at the Senior Bowl, the tight end position. It's deep this year. Last year, it was anything but. Last year, there weren't many tight ends. No one went in the first round other than Kyle Pitts. After Kyle Pitts, it was a big gap. I was a big fan of Penn State tight end Pat Fryermuth, but there wasn't much there on the bone at the tight end position last year. You had to get yours while it was there to be got. And teams went in, got their guy, and that was it. The year before, I thought it was as deep a tight end class that I had ever seen. And so I think this year is closer to 2020 than it is 2021, which was a down year for the tight end position. So I'm interested in seeing, what some of these guys do. And I actually think it might have been the 2019 draft class with the tight ends with some of these guys haven't panned out, but a lot of them have with Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson. I want to say it was 19 with Fant and Hawkinson. It might have been 2020. But, and Dawson Knox and all of those guys have been fantastic to this point in their careers. That draft class was ridiculously loaded at tight end. This one seems like it's on par. I don't think there's any Hawkinsons or Noah Fants that, take your breath away athletically like Kyle Pitts did last year that you have to take in the first round. But I think there will be some tremendous value day 2 on in this draft. And I think you'll start to see these guys going off the board like hotcakes in the second round. I think teams will start to pick their guys left and right once we get to day 2 of the draft. The tight end position is pretty deep this year. So that's going to do it for day 1 and day 2 coverage of the Senior Bowl and guys that stood out to me. There's one more day of Senior Bowl practice, and I'll take a look at that, and then I'll come back, give you my assessment there. But it's been fun watching these guys go out and compete, and that's the thing you keep hearing. That's the word that you probably hear the most on a week like this week with the Senior Bowl is compete. They want to see guys come out and compete, and I love it. That same defensive lineman that I told you about that they kicked inside, Logan Hall, he got into it with the center from Chattanooga. And so the first rep, Logan Hall kicked his ass. The second rep, the center kicked Logan Hall's ass and won the rep. So then those two are John. The center went off and he got hyped. His teammates came around him and he was talking. And so Logan Hall gets upset and he's talking. He's like, really? You want the smoke? So then the coach said, all right, let's break the tie. Let's do it again, because usually it's 2 reps. And then you go back to your huddle, and then the next 2 guys come up. Well, those 2 were chirping, so they sent him out there for a 3rd rep, and Logan Hall kicked his ass. I mean, it was a no contest right off the snap. He beat him right around, shortened the edge, got to the quarterback. Of course, There is no quarterback, but had the quarterback been there, it would have been game over. So, you know, that's the kind of competition you're looking for. Guys getting after it, and you see that out there, and that's a lot of fun to watch. So, again, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Hit the subscribe button for more great content. You won't be sorry. And turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing, and hit the like button as it helps this channel grow exponentially. Looking forward to your comments. Leave those down in the comment section. Love to read and hear from you guys as to what you gleaned from the first 2 days of Senior Bowl practices. And then you get to the Draft Prospects one-on-one series. We're going to start heating up over there, and those videos are going to start coming at you fast and furious after we get through these quarterbacks. It takes a lot more time with them. I like to be thorough with the quarterbacks. Then we can start speeding through the rest of these positions. So I look forward to chopping it up with you guys when we come back and recap day number 3 of the Senior Bowl practices, the final day of practice before the game on Saturday. See you guys then. Until then, get off the bench, get in the game, and kick it with me, your man Louie T. Until next time, you guys have a good one. Take care.